Hi to each and everyone. Today, in this subject, Readings in Philippine History, we will gonna be discussing two topics. The first topic is all about the agrarian reforms. Now first, what is agrarian reform? So from the word agrarian, it talks about the agriculture. And when we say reform, it means it makes changes. So to better understand, agrarian reform is about fixing or changing the entire system of agriculture in the country. Now, let me ask you something. Why does the agrarian reform really important, especially in the Philippine economy? It is very important because mostly of the Filipinos are farmers and they also live in the rural areas. When we say rural areas, they live in the countryside or probinsya. This reform mainly focuses on who owns the land and how it is fairly shared among farmers. It also deals with the economic and social class in the economy. In other words, it explains on how power and wealth are divided between landowners and land workers. It also tries to make the system fairer by giving the farmers a chance to own the land they work on. But there's a history behind it. To deeply understand what is agrarian reform, we will look at the Philippine history. We will come back to it because long ago, land issues started during the Spanish colonization. Now, let's proceed to the second topic, which is all about land ownership in the Philippines under Spain. So during the Spanish colonization, they created a system called Pueblo agriculture. To better understand, they live in a village, a compact village, together in a certain area, and they called pueblos by the Spaniards. So that sums up that the Pueblo agriculture is a setup for the Filipino farmers. It is a setup under the Spanish supervision. The second paragraph explains that the King of Spain back then owned all the land. Filipinos were the only farmers who planted and harvested crops. But the problem is they had to pay taxes not in money, but by their crops and their products that they work on. There are certain people who benefited the taxes the most from the Filipino farmers. The first one is the religious orders. They are the priests and the friars. The second one is the Spanish soldiers. They take the taxes as their rewards for their service. And the third one is the Spanish officials. They are called the encomenderos. So who are the encomenderos? Encomenderos are the Spanish people who controlled, who abuse, and who exploit the land of the Filipino farmers during the Spanish period. And then, here it comes the encomienda system. Encomienda system was very unfair. Farmers, Filipino farmers, had to work hard on the land that they didn't own. Worse, they were forced to do extra work that wasn't related to farming. They were abused and controlled that time, and with that they had no rights to protest. But as the time goes by, the system changed into hacienda system during the time of 19th century. Now, as we wonder, why do we think that the Spaniards changed the system? Because the Spanish government wanted to make the Philippines part of the world market because Philippines is rich in tobacco and sugar. But the problem is the ownership stays the same by the rich Spaniards and the friars, not the Filipino farmers. In the 1860s, Spain passed a law that said all the landowners must register their land. However, only the educated and powerful people knew about it, so they registered the lands under their names even if those lands were farmed by the Filipino peasants and farmers for generations. And because of this, many Filipinos lost their lands and became tenants or workers again. Now, as we've done discussing the agrarian reform and the Filipino farmers who are under the supervision of the Spaniards, we've come to realize that the system that were introduced by the Spaniards were very injustice and unfair because it shows exploitation among people, especially among Filipino farmers who work hard even on the land that they didn't work on. And with that, it shows a growing poverty and corruption in this country. And that is all for today's topic. I hope you learned something from me. Bye!